What happens when a black veteran is accused of faking his service in the very country he fought for? Surrounded, disrespected, and pushed to the edge, Marcus Bailey kept his composure. But when the truth finally came out, the entire bar was left speechless. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The sky over rural North Carolina had darkened into a deep blue, and the faint glow of neon beer signs cast shifting colors across the cracked pavement of Miller's Tap Room. The place wasn't polished or fancy, just a roadside staple where weathered truckers, off-duty mechanics, and aging regulars came to forget the world over a cheap drink. That night, Marcus Bailey pulled his dusty pickup into the gravel lot, cut the engine, and sat for a moment in silence. He'd only been home a week after his final deployment, and though the uniform on his back still carried the dust of foreign soil, what he needed now was quiet, something familiar, nothing more. The door creaked as he stepped inside, the smell of beer and smoke washing over him. A Johnny Cash song echoed faintly from the jukebox. Marcus wasn't there to socialize. He wasn't looking for recognition. He just wanted to sit, breathe, and feel something other than the weight of war. He found a table in the back corner, tucked away yet clear-eyed to the whole room. His boots may have been traded for sneakers that night, but there was no mistaking the way he carried himself, calm, watchful, and ready for whatever might come next. The calm didn't last long. Just as Marcus Bailey was beginning to relax, the door burst open with a jarring thud, letting in a gust of night air and the sound of heavy boots. 6 men entered, their voices loud, their presence louder. They moved like a pack, leather jackets, weathered ball caps, gray in their beards but not in their fire. Veterans by the look of their patches and the swagger in their walk. The kind of men who made it a point to be seen, to be heard, to take up space. Leading them was Ronnie Garrison, a broad-shouldered brute of a man with a salt-and-pepper beard and eyes like cold steel. He laughed heartily at something one of his buddies said, smacked the back of another, and made his way toward the bar like he owned it. But the moment his gaze landed on Marcus in the back corner, everything about him shifted. The laugh caught in his throat. His smile froze. Then, in a low voice meant only for his crew, he muttered something and gave a nod in Marcus's direction. The change was immediate. The laughter dimmed. The rest of the group turned to look. A silence, small but charged, settled in their huddle. Marcus felt it. That kind of stare wasn't new. He'd seen it in places where his presence alone was treated like a challenge. He didn't look back, just took another sip of water, eyes focused on the dim glow of the jukebox lights dancing on the wall. But the air had changed. He could feel it, like a storm cloud rolling in without thunder. Yet, at the bar, Ronnie leaned in again, whispering something that earned a chuckle from one of the others. A laugh, but not a kind one. The kind that had edges. Marcus didn't move, didn't flinch. But deep inside he knew trouble had just walked in, wearing American flag patches and misplaced pride. The boots came first, heavy, deliberate steps cutting through the fading hume of bar chatter and jukebox tunes. Ronnie Garrison was leading the charge, flanked by 2 of his cronies. The rest of the bar grew quieter with every stride they took toward the back corner where Marcus Bailey sat. The tension followed them like smoke. Ronnie stopped just a few feet from Marcus's table, his thick arms crossed, smirk curled with contempt. "Nice uniform," he barked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What is it? Halloween already?" His boys snorted behind him, emboldened by the performance. Marcus looked up slowly, eyes steady. He didn't blink. "It's mine," he replied calmly. "Earned it." Ronnie raised an eyebrow in mock surprise, then scoffed. "Earned it? Wearing sneakers?" "I've seen real soldiers, son, and they sure as hell don't look like you." There it was, the bite beneath the grin. Marcus didn't react. Not yet. "You trying to play dress-up for sympathy?" Ronnie pushed. "Maybe hoping someone buys you a free drink?" Still seated, still composed, Marcus answered, I'm not here for sympathy, and I don't need anyone buying me anything. Ronnie leaned in, his beer-soaked breath invading the last inches of space between them. His voice dropped into a sneer. You don't look like no soldier to me. The final word hung in the air like a dare. Behind him, someone muttered, Bet he doesn't even know how to salute. Another chimed in with a low laugh. Probably never seen a battlefield in his life. Marcus's grip tightened slightly on his glass, but his posture remained relaxed. Years of discipline didn't unravel over petty insults, not for men like this. But under the calm, something stirred. A quiet fury not born of ego, but of injustice. He looked up at Ronnie, his voice even, deliberate. I've got nothing to prove to you. But Ronnie wasn't satisfied, not yet. His pride was loud, his ignorance louder. Then why don't you prove it anyway? He growled. Let's see some tags. Otherwise, you're just another faker wasting space in a real man's bar. And with that, the fuse was lit. Marcus Bailey didn't blink, didn't flinch. He stared straight into Ronnie Garrison's face, calm as still water, while the fire behind the man's words tried to pull him into something ugly. But Marcus had stood in real fire before. Deserts, combat zones, the kind of places where men either learned to control themselves or didn't come home. This wasn't that. But it was getting close. I don't need your approval to belong here, Marcus said, voice low, steady as stone. Ronnie's smirk faltered for a split second, just long enough to reveal the sting. Then he scoffed, louder than before, doubling down in front of his crew. Show me your tag, soldier boy, or admit you're lying. Marcus remained seated, unmoved. I don't owe you proof, but if you think starting something here is a good idea. He let the words trail off like a slow-burning fuse. You might want to think again. Ronnie's fists curled. He didn't want words anymore. He wanted control, wanted a show. With a sudden growl, he lunged forward, hand outstretched, reaching for Marcus's collar like a schoolyard bully itching for dominance. But what he got wasn't submission, it was training. In a single, fluid motion, Marcus sidestepped his grasp, caught Ronnie's wrist mid-air, and twisted his arm behind his back with swift, unflinching precision. The bar gasped. Beer glasses stopped mid-sip. A man who moments ago had mocked Marcus now stood frozen, wide-eyed, while Ronnie let out a strangled yelp of pain. Marcus used Ronnie's momentum to drive him forward, face first into the edge of the table. The sound of impact echoed, not violent, but controlled. No rage, no excess, just efficiency. The room was dead silent, the jukebox now nothing more than a ghost in the background. I told you, Marcus said, his voice low, just loud enough for everyone to hear. You don't know who you're messing with. And just like that, the dynamic in the bar shifted, not through violence, but through truth, discipline, and the unmistakable weight of earned respect. Ronnie Garrison groaned, his cheek pressed hard against the edge of the table, his arm twisted behind him like a pretzel of pride and poor judgment. Gone was the swagger, gone was the smirk. All that remained was the grimacing face of a man who had underestimated the wrong person. Marcus Bailey didn't budge. His grip was firm but measured, not punishing, just controlled. He wasn't trying to humiliate Ronnie. He was trying to end it before it spiraled any further. You don't know who you're messing with, Marcus repeated, his voice level but laced with quiet authority. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. One of the other men in Ronnie's crew, Rick, lankier and visibly rattled, stepped forward, both hands slightly raised in a weak gesture of peace. Hey man, just let him go. He didn't mean nothing by it, he said, eyes darting between Marcus and the rest of the stunned bar. Marcus looked up at him, expression calm but eyes sharp. It came at me. You saw it. The bar was frozen in place. Glasses sat untouched. A couple near the pool table leaned forward, waiting to see which way the moment would tip. Behind the bar, Joanne, the bartender, a no-nonsense woman with a keen eye and years of experience with drunk egos, finally broke the silence. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. "Maybe it's time you boys took your drinks and left, before this gets worse." Rick looked around. His friends weren't so loud anymore. Their stances had shifted, from arrogant to awkward. The fire that had fueled their laughter moments ago had flickered into something else: shame. Marcus released Ronnie with a calculated shove, enough to make his point without crossing the line. Ronnie stumbled forward, gasping, cradling his wrist as he turned with a face full of fury and embarrassment. But even now, Marcus stood tall, silent and centered. He had held the line, not just against a man, but against everything that man thought he could get away with. And the room knew it. The moment Ronnie Garrison regained his footing, the bravado came flooding back. Only now it was drenched in wounded pride and desperation. Clutching his wrist, his face red and jaw clenched, he turned back toward Marcus Bailey and spat venom with every syllable. "You just assaulted me," he bellowed, loud enough for the entire bar to hear. "You're not even a real soldier. You're impersonating one. That's a federal crime." Marcus didn't flinch. He just stared, arms crossed, his posture unbothered but his senses razor-sharp. He knew what this was now. It wasn't just ego. It was accusation as a weapon. A last-ditch attempt to twist the narrative. Behind Ronnie, Rick hesitated before pulling out his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed. "Yeah," he said to the dispatcher, his voice theatrical and shaky. "We've got a guy here impersonating military. He just assaulted my friend." The words rippled through the bar like poison. A couple near the entrance exchanged uneasy glances. One man by the jukebox muttered, "Now that's a damn lie." But no one stood up. Not yet. Joanne, behind the bar, kept her eyes on Marcus, her hand slowly inching toward the landline just in case. The room, once tense with confrontation, now buzzed with uncertainty and fear. Marcus stayed rooted, breathing evenly. He knew how fast things could spiral, especially when false words outpaced the truth. He glanced around the room. Witnesses, maybe allies, maybe not. But he also knew the burden of proof would fall on him. Then came the sound that tightened every spine in the bar. Sirens. Flashing red and blue lights spilled across the bar's windows, casting ghostly reflections onto beer mugs and laminate tables. The rumble of tires stopped just outside. The door creaked open again, not with the recklessness of Ronnie and his crew, but with the deliberate, measured authority of law enforcement. Two officers stepped inside. The bar fell silent once more. This time, judgment wouldn't come from a drunken veteran's accusations. It would come from what happened next. And Marcus Bailey was ready. The bar held its breath as the two officers stepped inside, their uniforms sharp, their presence undeniable. Sergeant Dawson, a broad-shouldered man with a close-cropped haircut and mirrored sunglasses he didn't bother to remove, scanned the room with a quiet authority. Beside him walked Officer Lane, calm-eyed and alert, her every movement precise, observant. "We got a call about an assault," Dawson said evenly, his voice cutting clean through the silence. "Can someone tell us what's going on here?" Before anyone else could speak, Ronnie Garrison jumped in, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger at Marcus Bailey. "That guy, he assaulted me. He's wearing a fake uniform, said he was a soldier, but I've never seen a real soldier wearing sneakers." Dawson turned his attention to Marcus, who hadn't moved an inch since the officers entered. His stance was calm but alert, hands clearly visible, breathing measured. "Is that true, sir?" Dawson asked, his tone neutral but probing. Marcus's eyes met his. "No, sir. I was sitting here minding my business. This man and his friends confronted me because they didn't believe I was a real soldier. When he tried to grab me, I defended myself, that's all." Lane stepped forward slightly, her voice firm but composed. "Did anyone witness what happened?" A pause. Then Joanne, the bartender, cleared her throat and spoke up. "I saw it all. Ronnie made the first move. Marcus just defended himself, wasn't even close to an assault." A ripple of agreement followed. Eddie, a quiet regular near the jukebox, added, "Yeah, Ronnie's been running his mouth since he walked in. That guy didn't do anything wrong." Dawson looked back to Marcus. "Do you have proof of your service?" Marcus gave a small nod and gestured toward a duffel bag at his feet. "In there. Uniform, ID, name, rank. You're welcome to check." Dawson walked over, opened the bag, and carefully pulled out a neatly folded uniform with insignias and badges. Lane inspected the military ID. A quiet beat passed. Then Dawson straightened, looked Ronnie dead in the eye, and said, "He's clear. Everything checks out." And just like that, the tide turned. Ronnie Garrison's bravado crumbled the moment Sergeant Dawson spoke. "He's clear. Everything checks out." The words dropped like a gavel, echoing through the bar, louder than any accusation ever had. Ronnie's face twisted, part rage, part disbelief, part wounded pride. He opened his mouth as if ready to spit another protest. But before he could speak, Officer Lane turned toward him with eyes like sharpened glass. "Enough," she said coolly. "From what I've heard, you instigated this. You're lucky he's not pressing charges." Ronnie's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. The rest of his crew had already shrunk behind him, their earlier laughter replaced by silence and sidelong glances. Dawson stepped forward, his voice firm. "We're filing a report. If you want to pursue your claims, you're free to do so, but understand that false accusations are serious." Ronnie's mouth snapped shut. He knew he'd gone too far. The only thing louder than the warning was the humiliation written across his face. Marcus Bailey remained silent, watching. Not smug, not triumphant, just steady. The room around him, once uncertain, now brimmed with quiet respect. The officers turned to leave, and as they walked out, the tension lifted like smoke. And in the space left behind, truth stood tall. 3 days later, the sun hung low over the quiet streets of Fairmont, casting long amber shadows across the gravel driveway where Marcus Bailey knelt beside his old pickup, tightening bolts under the hood. The sharp scent of motor oil mingled with late summer air. For a while, it had been peaceful, just the clink of tools and the soft hum of cicadas. But that calm shifted when the distant sound of a motorcycle rolled up the road and into his drive. Marcus stood slowly, wiping grease-streaked hands on a rag as the bike came to a stop. The rider dismounted. Slender frame, too big leather jacket, thinning hair. It was Dennis, one of Ronnie's crew, the one who hadn't said much at the bar, but had laughed along all the same. Dennis removed his helmet and approached cautiously, like he was afraid of getting too close to something he didn't quite understand. "Marcus, right?" he asked, voice low. Marcus gave a curt nod. "That's right." Dennis shifted awkwardly, hands buried in his jacket pockets. I wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened at the bar." Marcus raised an eyebrow. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't open either. "You were part of it." "I know." Dennis looked down. "I didn't stop it, and I should have. Ronnie, he's got a way of stirring people up. But that doesn't excuse it. We were wrong." Marcus studied him. The man looked uncomfortable, vulnerable even, not rehearsed, real. "Way now?" he asked. Dennis shrugged. "Because I've been thinking about it ever since. Watching how you handled it, I don't want to be that kind of man anymore." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then finally, he leaned against the truck, arms folded. "It doesn't erase what happened, but it's a start." Dennis nodded, his face etched with quiet relief. And in the stillness between them, something unspoken passed. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first fragile step toward it. As Dennis rode off down the gravel road, the rumble of his motorcycle fading into the dusk, Marcus Bailey stood in silence beside his truck, arms crossed, eyes steady. He wasn't sure what he felt. Relief, maybe. Not for the apology, but for what it represented. An acknowledgement. A crack in the wall. The incident at Miller's Tap Room hadn't surprised him, not really. He had worn the uniform long enough to know that some battles don't wait for deployment orders. Some happen in the places you're supposed to feel at home. In bars, in gas stations, in quiet glances that carry loud judgments. But Dennis's visit reminded him that not all stories end in division. Sometimes dignity creates space for something better, and sometimes it plants seeds in soil you thought too bitter to grow anything. Marcus looked up at the fading sky, the last of the sun casting bronze streaks across the hood of his truck. He wiped his hands on the same rag and let out a quiet breath. Not heavy, not tired, but solid, grounded. He didn't need applause. He didn't need to be seen. He just needed to know that how he carried himself, that the choices he made, mattered. And deep down he knew they did. This story reminds us that not all battles are fought overseas. Some happen right here at home, in quiet corners and everyday moments where dignity is tested. Marcus Bailey's strength wasn't in how he fought back, but in how he chose to stand tall without raising his voice. In a world quick to judge by appearances and slow to admit fault, his calm courage and grace under pressure turned ignorance into reflection and confrontation into transformation. In today's divided world, these moments matter. They challenge us to rise above ego, to speak truth without hatred, and to listen, especially when it's uncomfortable. If this story moved you, made you pause, or made you feel something real, don't let it stop here. Like the video, subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because one voice, spoken with integrity, can change everything.